Welcome to today's webinar on LIHWAP renters. My name is Sarah Dalgleish, and I'm a program specialist with the Office of Community Services. The purpose of this webinar is to support low-income household water assistance program grant recipients with procedural considerations related to serving households who rent and other households who are not billed directly by water vendors for water and wastewater services. Throughout this webinar, we will refer to LIHWAP grantees as recipients. A recipient is defined as the LIHWAP lead agency for a state, territory, or tribe. Recipient is synonymous with grantee, a term used previously in OCS communications. Additionally, you may hear us refer to subrecipients. A subrecipient is an organization that receives a portion or subaward of the LIHWAP grant funding, usually through a contract or grant, from the LIHWAP lead agency for a state, territory, or tribe. While the LIHWAP lead agency retains responsibility and accountability for all activities carried out under the grant award, the state, territory, or tribe may select subrecipient organizations to serve as local administering agencies who are subject to all terms and conditions of the award. By the end of today's webinar, you should have a better understanding of application and intake considerations for renters, common renter scenarios, how your program can effectively work with landlords, case file management considerations for renters. Before beginning our discussion, we will review who is eligible for LIHWAP assistance. LIHWAP benefits provide low-income households with water utility payment assistance. Payments are made directly to water vendors on behalf of eligible households to reduce past due and current balances for water and wastewater services. A household applying for LIHWAP benefits can be determined to be eligible through either income eligibility or through categorical eligibility. The threshold for income eligibility is set by the grant recipient organization, but may not exceed the greater of either 150% of the federal poverty line or 60% of state median income. A hybrid approach of the two options can be taken based on the household size, but cannot exceed either the 150% of the federal poverty line or 60% of the state median income. Categorical eligibility refers to the concept that a household can be deemed eligible solely based on a single household member's enrollment in a certain mean-tested benefits program. We will go over details related to eligibility determination later in the presentation. A key component of your application and intake process is determining what information you will need to collect from applicants to determine their eligibility for the program. During the application process, you will also want to determine how applicants pay for their water or wastewater services. Here are some application and intake considerations for renters. If the applicant pays a water provider directly, collect the water provider name, contact information, account number, and a copy of their most recent bill. If the household rents and does not pay a separate water bill, collect their landlord's name and contact information and a copy of their most recent rental receipt or lease agreement stating water service coverage and cost. LIHWAP recipients may find it helpful to reformat, revise, or repurpose existing LIHEAP client applications for LIHWAP, paying close attention to the example information to collect for renters. In addition, LIHWAP recipients who do not yet have a suitable application for LIHWAP services may find that the Household Application Sample tool will assist in their application efforts. This tool was previously released in IM 2022-01, and you can find this tool on the OCS LIHWAP website under Policy and Guidance. LIHWAP recipients may customize this tool to fit their program needs. It is not a requirement, but it may assist LIHWAP recipients in developing a sample client application. As stated in the LIHWAP terms and conditions, recipients must establish procedures to treat owners and renters equitably. There are many different scenarios and processes that can be implemented to serve households who rent, including households whose water is included in the rental payment. In many cases, this may require the local benefit administering agency to work with landlords and or landlord's water utility vendor to obtain account information and to confirm that the benefit payment has been passed on to the renter in the form of a rent reduction. Recipients may use outreach and intake or eligibility determination funds to create and implement procedures for working with landlords and to make the process as easy and efficient as possible within the program constraints. Please also remember to refer to your LIHWAP model plan, as Section 2.3 of the plan asks recipients, how will you support households whose utility payments are included in their rental payments? Next, we will discuss a few examples of situations you may encounter when providing LIHWAP benefits to renters. Households who rent and are the account holder with their water utility vendor. These households can be treated the same as homeowner applicants. Households who rent, including mobile home owners or renters who lease the space or land, and whose water bill is included in their rental fee, these households typically fall into two groups: those with a single water meter or those with a shared water meter. We'll discuss the groups in detail on the upcoming slides. To serve households with single water meters, the administering agency will need to obtain or confirm certain information from the landlord, including the name of the water vendor, the account number, and the cost of water charged in the rental fee. With this information, the benefit administering agency can make a payment directly to the water vendor. Once the water vendor receives a payment, the agency must confirm that the benefit is being passed to the household in the form of a rent reduction. To serve households with shared water meters, the administering agency will need to obtain or confirm certain information from the landlord, including the name of the water vendor, the account number, and an agreed upon average household amount for monthly water usage. The agreed upon average monthly water usage can be based on the average cost per person, multiplied by the number of people in the applicant household. Now let's take a look at how to calculate the average cost per person. The average cost per person can be determined by the average monthly cost per person in the service area as determined by the water vendor, or the current bill of the shared water meter divided by the total number of occupants sharing the meter. For example, once you've identified the average cost per person, this amount should be multiplied by the number of eligible household members in the applicant household. For example, 25 people reside in a 10-unit building that shares a meter, with a monthly water bill of $1,000. So the monthly cost per person is $40. 1,000 divided by 25 people. An applicant's household in that building has 4 eligible household members. In this case, this applicant household amount for water usage would be $160. $40 multiplied by 4 eligible household members in the applicant household. Similar to single water meters, with this information, the benefit administering agency can make a payment directly to the water vendor. In these cases, once the water vendor receives a payment, the agency must confirm that the benefit is being passed to the household in the form of a rent reduction. Now let's talk about how your program and your administering agencies can work with landlords. Please keep in mind that to provide a LIHWAP benefit to rental households, the administering agency has to collect and/or confirm information from the landlord in order to provide a benefit and ensure consumer protection for applicants. The required information can be gathered and documented using a variety of methods, including but not limited to agreements with landlords or through a landlord verification form. Payment agreements with landlords are not required but can be helpful. Through landlord agreements, the grant recipient should ensure landlords agree that by accepting a LIHWAP benefit payment made to a utility vendor on behalf of a household, the landlord is bound by LIHWAP requirements to provide the household with rent reductions in the amount equal to the benefit received. To ensure proper enforcement of this program requirement, OCS highly encourages grant recipients to develop a 3-party agreement. We will discuss the details of 3-party agreements on the next slides. 3-party agreement ensures that all parties to the agreement, including the grantee, landlord, and household, acknowledge the following. The LIHWAP benefit payment is made directly to the utility vendor to be applied to the landlord's account for water service delivered to the household. This LIHWAP benefit payment should not exceed the amount the household is paying for water service, which may be included in the monthly rent. The landlord shall acknowledge the LIHWAP benefit payment is a benefit for the household, though the benefit payment is made directly to the utility vendor for an account under the landlord's name. The landlord and renter agree the LIHWAP benefit payment shall be provided to the household in the form of a rent reduction prospectively and shall not be less than the amount of LIHWAP benefit payment paid to the utility vendor. The grant recipient must implement monitoring and enforcement procedures to ensure LIHWAP benefits are received by the program's intended recipients. These procedures should include, but not limited to, providing all parties a copy of the signed three-party agreement, verifying of the intended beneficiaries, and providing notifications to both the renters and landlords to explicitly outline a process how renters will retrieve their authorized LIHWAP benefit payment through prospective reduction in rent payments. In addition, please utilize the sample three-party agreement template that OCS released to help with your program administration. Now that we discussed considerations for working with landlords, including payment and three-party agreements, let's take a look at additional areas for you to consider regarding monitoring and enforcement of LIHWAP benefits to renters. Grant recipients are strongly encouraged to implement monitoring and enforcement procedures based on best practices to ensure LIHWAP benefits are received by the program's intended recipients. LIHWAP grant recipients are responsible for implementing their own monitoring and enforcement authorities and for systems to prevent fraud and improper use of funds. Improper use of funds includes payments to landlords that do not benefit renters. Grant recipients should use their own monitoring and enforcement authorities and systems to ensure that landlords comply with payment agreements and intended renters receive their assistance. Three-party agreements should be set up in such a way that minimizes the burden and actions required by renters applying for LIHWAP benefits. You might be wondering what occurs in instances where, despite your organization having implemented monitoring and enforcement procedures based on best practices, the landlord has failed to pass the LIHWAP benefit along to the intended household through rent reduction. In these instances, auditors may make a determination based on the specific circumstances of their review on whether these incidents be reported as findings or material weaknesses during an audit. If LIHWAP payments ultimately benefited only landlords and not the eligible households that they were intended to assist due to improper and inadequate monitoring procedures, the payments could be subject to findings or material weaknesses during an audit, subject to the discretion of the auditor. When the grant recipient has taken reasonable measures to implementing monitoring and enforcement procedures, an incident where a landlord breached an agreement to pass LIHWAP benefits as a reduction in rent payment to an eligible household is less likely to be reported as a finding or material weakness during an audit. While OCS cannot guarantee that any audit will not result in a finding or material weakness, OCS will give strong consideration to any good faith efforts through agreements and monitoring when determining whether a disallowance would be warranted. Based on legislative instructions, LIHWAP payments must only be for arrearages and rate reductions related to water services, not for general rent payments. For example, if LIHWAP applicants who rent are behind on their rent, and their rent includes a water bill, direct payments cannot be made directly to the renter. In addition, payments cannot be directly made to households. Grant recipients are encouraged to work with rental property owners to identify the actual water utility costs, which can be paid directly to the water utility using LIHWAP funds, and to deduct the amount of the water payment from a current or future rental bill. The Office of Community Services also encourages grantees to consider other available resources, such as the Community Services Block Grant and Emergency Rental Assistance to help address household needs not addressed through LIHWAP. The unique and widespread impacts of not having access to water and wastewater services, particularly during the pandemic, necessitates a comprehensive approach to addressing water needs for vulnerable households. As such, when possible, we encourage prospective LIHWAP grantees to design creative solutions that leverage multiple funding sources to meet the comprehensive needs of low-income households. Maintaining LIHWAP applicant and client information in a secure and organized fashion is key to program integrity. LIHWAP recipients will want to consider existing case file management policies and procedures and ensure that they are applicable to handle LIHWAP applicants and clients. A good starting point is to review what your agency is currently utilizing for LIHEAP. LIHWAP recipients could ensure that their case file management protocol includes information for which and what type of documentation must be included in a case file. Intake workers will need to document how they have screened applicants for eligibility. In doing so, make sure that your case file documentation and/or program policies and procedures include information that supports eligibility determination for LIHWAP. Things to consider including are calculations used to determine gross or net income, case notes that describe any inconsistencies between applicant information and information intake workers have obtained or reviewed during the income and identity verification process, documentation of all communication and communication attempts with the applicant, including how the intake worker requested missing or additional information for incomplete applications, documentation that supports the steps taken by the intake worker to verify identity and income, i.e., determine eligibility for LIHWAP, and how that was overseen. Please remember that you will be dealing with your client's personally identifiable information, or PII. Ensure case files are kept in a secure place and that your policies clearly indicate who has access to this information. If you are utilizing hard copy case files, it's recommended that the information be stored in a secure, locked location. Please refer to your model plan to ensure that the documentation required as part of your case file management policy includes information you included in the identity and income verification sections of your model plan. Also ensure that the documentation required is in alignment with your income and identity verification policies and procedures. In addition to standard information you collect, such as application and any other supplemental forms the applicant is required to submit, such as a zero income statement, copy of a current photo ID for the applicant, copy of the social security card for the applicant and all household members, income documentation, proof of residence documentation, recent utility bill or account information. You should collect renter-specific documentation such as landlord agreements, landlord verification forms, etc. This concludes the LIHWAP Renter webinar. By attending this webinar, hopefully you gained a better understanding of application and intake considerations for renters, common renter scenarios, effectively working with landlords, and case file management considerations for renters. Thank you for watching this webinar.